Recording in progress.
Take it away.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to, what are we starting here? Quarter 3 of 2021, which is pretty insane to think about how fast 2021 is moving compared to 2020. But in our estimation, the market has been pretty crazy in the first half. And I know we had a lot of questions curious on the market. So I wanted to start off with kind of what I'm seeing as the DB as far as market trends, market conditions right now. So month over month, for the past 2 months, we've added about 1,000 listings in the MLS. So I would say in May, we were probably hovering around 4,200, 4,300 active listings. I checked it yesterday. We were at 6,300 active listings, which anybody who's been in the industry for a while knows that's still significantly low inventory. So we're still low inventory. I haven't seen any kind of influx of investor listings. I know everybody was worried about some of the deferred payments on rentals and stuff like that coming due and people getting kicked out of their homes, but I haven't seen or noticed or felt any kind of increase in inventory that way. It's been a steady, slowly adding a couple hundred listings every week. It's not like 10,000 listings showed up overnight. So in that regard, I think the market's still hyper competitive, but it's becoming a little bit more insulated, price point, area specific. As far as if you're going to get, it's interesting. I mean, you put a house on the market, it's on the market for 2 weeks and people start wondering what's wrong with it now, right? I mean, whereas I remember when I first started, I would always tell my clients, let's not even discuss price reductions or anything until we're on the market for at least 30 days, because then we'll kind of figure out where we're at. Right now, if it's not gone in the first weekend, people start asking, well, what's wrong with it? What does it need? Why is it still here? What's the issue? So it's an interesting turn of events in our market, but it just depends. It's really hyper specific. Like I still do a few deals here and there, and a client referral had me list their home in Goodyear, and we got 10 offers, and we sold 25,000 over asking, and as is, no repairs, cash deal. Now I had another property that was the complete opposite of that. We had one offer, conventional financing, right at list price, and nobody else was even wanting. Everybody kept saying it was overpriced. So it just depends on where it is, what price point you're at, because it's always a matter of how big is your buyer pool, right? I mean, that's kind of what I feel is driving the most action on your listings. If you're in that $300,000 to $400,000 range, your buyer pool is pretty large. And so you're going to get the investors who want to rent, you're going to get the buyers who can qualify FHA, you're going to get the buyers who can qualify conventional, who have some money to put in the game. So you're going to get a different buyer. And if you go 500, 600, 700, slowly the buyer pool starts to decrease. And as inventory ticks up and people have options, that's going to generally change your days on market, how fast you sell, what kind of terms you can get. Now, that said, I know everybody probably has a buyer or two they're working with that they probably put 20, 30 offers in. They probably have a listing that sold really quickly. So from my perspective as a day-to-day, yes, there's more listings. I feel that that's a good thing for us. I mean, we needed inventory. We needed somewhere to put our buyers. And I don't know if anybody saw the stats, but I think the stats just came out, like 123 people every day are moving to Arizona. And that trend has been the trend for, gosh, we've been doing this broker call, and ever since I've been doing it, it's year over year, month over month, quarter after quarter. The trend is the Maricopa County has more people coming every day than most other full states. I think last year the city of Phoenix got more people, net gain of more people than like 21 other full states got. And that's just Phoenix, not Scottsdale, not Gilbert, not Chandler, not anywhere else, just the city, the municipality of Phoenix. So that's kind of the market we're in. So I feel like we're a little bit insulated for any changes. I know obviously the economy is going to be a big driver, but Phoenix, Arizona has done a pretty good job being business friendly, being an attraction for people to come. I know that's, if you look at the freeways are starting to get busy. COVID restrictions have eased. People are going back to work. So, what used to take me 25 minutes to get to work is now 35 minutes. And I need to start planning that better because I'm still stuck in that 2020 drive to work. And that's not the case anymore. So that's kind of the 30,000 mile view of where the market is right now. It is increasing in inventory. We're still seeing strong buyer pool, but we are seeing more homes for sale. And with options, people become less desperate. The offers you're going to get probably will be less aggressive, depending on your house. Depends on how nice it is, where it is, et cetera, et cetera. But that's always the determination in real estate. Where, location, obviously, and then how nice is it? How much money do I got to put into it? How much work is it going to be? Can I go next door and get the same exact floor model and not have to do anything? Or is this a unique house with a unique backyard, with a unique pool, with unique features that I can't get at the next house, or would cost me so much to put into the next house that it doesn't make any sense when I could, amortize it over 30 years at 2.8% interest instead of paying cash out of my pocket. So those are always going to be the drivers of what sells your real estate, what sells your homes. But again, guys, if you're talking to your clients and they're asking you how the market is, the market in Arizona is very strong, still weighted towards the seller, still weighted towards multiple offers, but every day that's changing slightly, which is, in my opinion, is a good thing. I don't want it to be too slanted towards sellers, and I don't want it to be too slanted toward buyers. An even market is a competitive market, and competition is good, but some of the stuff, from a broker's perspective, some of the stuff we're seeing, some of the offers we were seeing over the last 3 or 4 months keeps us up at night and really gives us heartburn. And we're still waiting a little bit to see what happens in a few months, few years, if, all the people who did very crazy things and waived every contingency that they had in that contract bought a house, and see if they have what we like to call buyer's remorse. So that's kind of—
Andrew?
Yes, sir.
Our only vulnerability is the obvious one. We're having some affordability issues.
Oh, for sure.
There's a lot of people are priced out of the market. But for the first time ever, affordability issues haven't killed the market. So that's our only real vulnerability. And interest rates were getting concerning. And if you're watching the bond market, the bonds have been very friendly, and interest rates actually came back down a little. So that was a big concern for the third and fourth quarter of 2021 was interest rates, and they seem like they're going to be pretty darn calm.
Well, then that's the other thing too is we've increased inventory, and what I would watch for is if that increase in inventory and this kind of slowing of buyer pace, if that levels out our appreciation. The appreciation we've had over the last, even 18 months since January of 2020 to now is just absolutely, it's unprecedented. The amount of appreciation in 18 months is crazy. It's crazy, and it could never continue at this pace. And now what I'm curious to watch and curious to see is, does it take a more natural appreciation, or did we go so high so fast that it levels off now and kind of sits flat for a while? Which I'm kind of thinking it's going to be that second one. I think it's going to flatten out here, where it's not going to go up, but it's not going to go down, because like John said, affordability, not everybody can pay $600,000 for a 1,400 square foot house in Scottsdale. And that's and if you've been watching, that's kind of where things have been at. If it's any sort of remodeled, you're seeing asking prices for 1,400 square feet at $550, $600, and they're getting them. And, I work with an investor, and the investor, he's getting beat on offers by $30,000, $40,000. And it's just, that could never continue. So to think that was going to continue, forever was pie in the sky. But I don't think the sky's falling either. I think we're just going to level off here for a while. I think buyer demand is still strong. We're still going to be selling homes. It's just a matter of setting the right expectation for your buyer and seller now, because that seller expectation has drastically shifted to where they think that, they could write their own ticket. And for a while they could. Now, I'll be very curious to see what happens with days on market, what happens with sellers, how competitive they want the buyers to be and what they're expecting with their offer. So it's going to take some education on your guys' part to let them know that, while the market hasn't slowed down, there's definitely an increase in inventory. And when people have choices, they don't make such irrational decisions. They have more choices. They know maybe there's a house tomorrow they could get, whereas before this was the only one in the whole neighborhood. And if they wanted their kids to go to that school, this is the house they had to get. So they were willing to do whatever it took to get that house, which might not be the case, moving forward.
Well,
It never ends well.
Let's face it, as the prices go up, obviously more people want to think about selling. We see that too. We've seen a certain increase in the number of owner agent listings we've had, and those are agents, thinking maybe now is a good time to cash in. But I think one of my biggest pet peeves over the years is when someone says it's a total seller's market. It's like, it's never a total seller's market. I mean, you always have to ask yourself, what is it about the house? What is it about the potential pool of buyers? I think one of the things conversations I have every day with agents is this a retail offering or a wholesale offering? A house that's turnkey move-in ready is a retail offering. And if it's a finance buyer, you had mentioned a 2.8% interest rate, $10,000 more is only $40 a month at 2.75 interest. So on a 30-year fix. So, for someone to pay $10,000 more for your turnkey move-in ready house is cheap to them, as opposed to the one across the street where it needs $10,000 worth of flooring. It needs $10,000 worth of appliances. They don't have the 20 grand. They have the $40 a month. They don't have the 20,000. So those are always things to consider too. But I think interest rates are obviously, like John mentioned and Andrew has mentioned, is obviously a driving force beneath it all. And a sudden uptick there would certainly level off some things as well.
No, I agree. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns about kind of the market? My take on the market overview. Obviously, I'm not running the Cromford report here. I'm just basing it off of kind of what we see on a day-to-day basis, the pulse of our brokerage. And our brokerage does do a significant amount of transactions in Maricopa and Arizona. I mean, we were number 2 last year in the entire state for volume and size. So we do see a fair amount of transactions. That's the kind of the pulse of the market that I'm getting right now from our internal perspective, and not necessarily the market as a whole or zip code specific, but just kind of anecdotal, what I'm seeing based on the MLS, what I'm seeing based on transactions coming in, listings taken, things like that. So anybody have any questions for me on that?
By the way, we're in all vertical markets, we're in all demographics, we're in all zip codes. We're an amazing barometer for the market. We have been for the last 3 years. As my home group goes, the market goes. It's a great place for us to be able to prognosticate and get a little crystal ball into the future. It's an advantage large brokerages have that are everywhere, because we're in every price range. We're in multiple markets around the state. We even have a good grasp on small markets. So what Andrew says is actually back pretty much market wide, simply because of where you guys are at. We're selling everything everywhere. Keep doing that, by the way. Job security for us.
So we do have a list of questions. Some of these questions kind of correlate to the things that I wanted to cover today. One of the first ones that I see on here, and it goes back to this market conditions that we're talking about, and winning in this market, and how do you win how do you win, right? How do you win for your buyer? How do you win for your seller? And it's funny. One of the things that we like to say here is like, it's never about what we want to do. It's always, what does your client want to do? Because at the end of the day, your client is the one who's going to win, lose, draw with whatever decisions are made, right? So they're relying on us to give them sound advice, at least, and not necessarily push them one way or the other. One of the questions that I hate the most is, what would you do in this situation? And what I would do versus what you're going to do are two completely different things based on my experience, my financial standing, your financial standing. Like, it's just not a good question. I hate that question. when I get it from my clients, because I can always tell them like, well, here's what the contract says, here's what they should have done, here's where we're at, here's our options, here's what can happen if we exercise that option, and what do you want to do? So we did a Queen Creek roundtable last week, I believe. Yeah, last week. And one of the questions was, how do you win? How does a buyer win in this market? And I find that question it's kind of perplexing, right? Because every single buyer there's a limit they can pay for a house, or there's a limit they're willing to pay for a house. So if you took price out of it, right? Because there's always someone who could pay more. There's always someone more money. There's always someone more willing to do what you're not willing to do to get a house, waive the appraisal, put zero in that inspection, on days for inspection. There's things that people are willing to do. And for me, one of the things that I said in that roundtable was, the first thing I always like to do, especially if I know it's going to be competitive, is I call the listing agent. Try to establish a rapport with the listing agent. And then I ask them, what is important to the seller? You take price out of it, because obviously in this market, we're probably going to give you list or above, right? We're going to give you list or above. So what else can I do? What date do you want to close? Do you need assistance moving? Do you need, what do you need from me as a buyer's agent representing my client, that I could go tell my client, hey, if you do these 3 things, unless you get blown out of the water by price, which everybody has experienced that, we have a good chance to be at the top of the pile. So can I lower the inspection? Can I limit my options on the Binzer to accept or reject? Can I shorten the appraisal timeframe? Can I and here's one that not everybody realizes, is in the contract, there's no time frame for when the appraisal should happen. It doesn't even address it. It just says by COE 3 days prior, you have to have signed your loan docs or get clear to close, right? Without prior to doc conditions. So put in there, we'll order it day 1. We'll order the appraisal the first day, so that they have certainty. Those are things. And as a listing agent, just a quick aside, as a listing agent, I would always counter, you're going to order the appraisal within 5 days of contract acceptance.
Buyer to instruct the lender.
In this market, especially depending on where you're at, if you're outside of the Phoenix metro area, that is a problem that I have seen over and over and over again. Even if you're, adjacent to the municipality, like you're in Queen Creek, you're in Casa Grande, they're quoting 3 weeks for appraisals, from the day you order it, 3 weeks to get it back, because no one wants to take the job because it's too far, or they're too busy, or there's no comps and they don't want to do it, right? There's all kinds of reasons why an appraiser might not want to do the job. But as a buyer's agent, if I could give you a little bit of certainty, like we're going to order it this day, and then after that, the chips fall where they may, we have no control over when the appraiser goes out, or who picks up the job, or what AMC gets assigned to it. But at least I can tell you, it's ordered, paid for day 1. And we're not going to ask you for any repairs. We're going to do our inspection and due diligence. We're not going to ask for anything. We're either going to say, yes, we're good. No, we're not. So those are the main items, and if you want to get into, shrinking the appraisal contingency, making it match up to list price, making it, paying whatever amount you want to pay over the appraised value, if you have the money to do so. Those are very intimate conversations with clients. Anything with financing, is super hyper specific to your buyer and what they're willing to do, what they can do, and what they want to do, right? I mean, it's all about what they want to do, because I think for a while there, we all saw where buyers were just wanting to win. They just wanted to win, and then they would cancel. We saw a significant amount of cancellations in the past 2 to 3 months, where the same buyer, the same agent, over and over and over under contract, because the buyer, you get into this point where you write 5 different offers, 10 different offers. At a certain point, you just want to hear yes, right? You just want to hear, yep, your offer was accepted, no matter what it is that you did. And then you go into that inspection, you're looking for, the electrical plate's a little bit crooked, and that just sets you off and you're out. You want to cancel because you feel like you just paid $50,000 over what you should have paid for it. So those are the things that I try to avoid, set up the expectation with my clients, with my buyer, with my seller. And then at the end of the day, it's like, what is the best for the list? What's the best for the seller? What makes him most comfortable? And for me, I'm willing to take a little bit less money for certainty. And that's the precise reason that OfferPad, Open Door, Zillow offers, all these people who do that kind of, they trade certainty for price, right? And that's, for me, how can you get as close to them as possible without giving up the entire farm with your buyer offer? And as a seller, you know, that's I don't want to come back. I don't want to be back on the market. I don't want to be back on the market in 20 days. I want to know I take your offer, I close. So what's that worth to me? I don't know. Depends on the house, but it could be worth thousands of dollars in my head, that certainty that once I take this off, I'm going to close. Because what if you call the listing agent and you find out that seller has put a non-refundable deposit down on a house in another state and they need to close, they have to close.
Right.
They have to. So that is where we're seeing a lot of people win offers, back out, or find a loophole, or just get cold feet and say, we're done, because I'd rather lose my $5,000 earnest deposit than spend $50,000 over what I thought that house should have been. So that's happening more than you guys would think. But again, to me, it's about certainty. And then there's also, you know, as an agent presenting an offer, there's a certain amount of skill and care that goes into presenting that offer in a professional manner that makes you an agent that other agents want to work with. And if it shouldn't matter, right? What should matter is getting the most money for your client. But if you think that an agent's not telling his client, like, hey, this guy was a complete jerk,
Be quiet.
you know, a complete jerk. And, you know, or all they sent me was the transaction desk link. All I got is the transaction desk link with a bunch of docs attached. Now I got to go decipher what they meant to say in that offer, right? Like, you do stuff like that. If you think that the listing agent isn't talking to his client, like, hey, I got 10 offers, they're all about the same, but this guy right here, all he did was send me a link, and I don't have any clue, I don't know anything about the buyer. I don't know if they're qualified. All I got is this transaction desk link. So that, to me, talking to the agent, communication with the agent, making sure that the agent understands the why of the buyer and how they're going to make this an easy, successful transaction. I think that's, at the end of the day, that's the best we can do for our clients, because everybody has a cap. Everybody has a limit. There's no magic pill to get an offer accepted. But I guarantee if you talk to the listing agent about what's important to the seller, show the seller's agent that you are a professional and it'll be an easy transaction, they're not going to regret accepting your offer. I think you put yourself to at least the top of the list to get an acceptance.
You call it certainty. I call it peace of mind, but it's kind of the same thing. It's, you know, look at what some of those guys do. We'll close on your birthday. It's all cash, you know, we'll give you a month to move out, you know, whatever it is. It's giving sellers peace of mind, and no one can put a price on peace of mind. Like you said, what's important to you might be $10,000. What's important to me might be $5,000. No one can do that. And sellers right now, just so you know, especially traditional sellers on a retail property, can afford to sell to whoever they want. I mean, you know, a house someone bought a couple of years ago, Andrew and I were just talking about this the other day, has gone up a couple $100,000. Maybe they put 50 or 100 down. They have $300,000 in equity, and they can choose offer A or B or C, and it might not always be the highest one. People think it's all about the money. It's not always. It might be about the move. It might be about convenience, you know, a lot of different things. Think about Open Door or OfferPad, who you just mentioned a minute ago, for example. What are they doing? Are they the highest and best offer in the market? No, they're not lowball offers. They're fair market value, but after the net on those, the net proceeds on those after 8 to 12% in expenses is low. What are they offering? More maximum peace of mind. Close on your birthday, but minimum net proceeds. And by the way, no representation at all. They don't represent the seller. They represent themselves as a buyer, as an investor. The I in I buyer stands for I'm an investor. I intend to profit, and I don't represent you, right? So what do you offer? I can offer you full representation, or limited in some cases. I can offer you, you know, maximum net proceeds if you listen to me and we help you doll the house up and appeal to that bigger pool of buyers Andrew mentioned earlier. In exchange, and I can give you some peace of mind with showings by appointment only, and, you know, offers, you know, in writing only, or whatever it is. I can't give you maximum peace of mind, but most buyers or most sellers I know will opt for max net proceeds and representation over 100%, you know, or maximum peace of mind, even though peace of mind is important to everyone.
Now Now I have to do the John thing. And there's a couple of peace of mind issues, people out there that are think they've given them peace of mind. They're thinking they're making it easier and better for the seller, that are absolutely contrary and counterintuitive to long-term peace of mind. And that is sellers countering or buyers offering to waive the property inspection. That is never in the seller's best interest. Never, because it limits the buyer's ability to verify disclosures. We also have sellers having buyers waive spuds. That is virtually never in the seller's best interest or give them long peace of mind, because a spuds is just a document. The duty to disclose is in section 5B and statutory. So what we have is people waiving inspection, waiving spuds, going to walk through, finding things wrong. There's really nothing they can do about it. And the only remedy they have against sellers would be after closing litigation. They're acting out of desperation. Johnism for 2021, desperation will lead to litigation. If you get in a conversation about waiving inspection and a buyer wants to do it and a seller accepts that, make sure your seller understands. That sounds sexy. It's not. It's a recipe for disaster. When you get right down to it, people want buyers to know what they're buying, because if they find out too late or after closing, there's only one group of people that can handle and take care of that for them, and it ain't us, it's lawyers. And I've talked to attorneys right now that are talking about the opportunistic view real estate attorneys are having as plaintiff attorneys for buyers after this market settles down. So even though it sounds really good for your seller, well, good, they're not going to inspect. I don't have to give a spuds. That is never really in their interest unless it's a flat out wholesale and they know what they're getting and they sign 15 pages disclosure saying, I agree that I'm an idiot, but I don't mind being an idiot. Here's my money. Those are the two downfalls that I'm seeing. And it's really scary because people think it's good for sellers. It ain't in my best Texas.
Yeah. Well,
Always got to be Debbie Downer.
No, I think you have to define peace of mind. I think it's a great point you're making. For me, peace of mind is more like your closing date. It maybe is a few days of post possession for moving, getting paid to pack, so to speak. It might be shrinking the Binzer down from 3 options to 2 options, as Andrew mentioned earlier. I'm either accepting or rejecting at the end of my 10-day inspection period. Maybe it's reducing the inspection period to 7 days. In a week, we'll know we're all in or we're all done. Not waiving, certainly not. Appraisal, modify the appraisal contingency, use a new additional clause addendum. Don't waive it completely. So I think, hard to get a broker and a fellow instructor to ever say, I think you should throw the baby out with the bathwater. You won't get any of the 3 of us to advise that ever. At the end of the day, though, it really comes down to what do the parties want to do. And I've been throwing a few things as the guys have been talking. I've been kind of throwing them down in chat, some of the comments they've made along the way in my own words. But, when somebody says, Todd, I want you to draw up a counteroffer asking the buyer to waive this and waive that and waive this and wave goodbye to your license. No, but, get an email, just drop an email and say, hey, Bob, contrary to my advice, you're telling me you want to do this. If so, please ping me back, please confirm, and that sort of thing. We call that risk management. We call that, paper trail. What was Dax always say, paper the file. That's what he's talking about. And Andrew, you can speak more to that.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we're instruction takers for our client. We offer representation. We offer them our opinion. But we're representing them, and we have to follow their instructions. Part of our car load, right? We have obedience, and they tell us to do something. Okay. But as Todd said, there's a difference between doing something and doing it for your client and doing something smartly because we're in a business and we have a license that's attached to this business. So if they want to do something that's drastically, that we would say, heck no, there's no way I would do that. I would never do that. Like Todd said, drop an email to them, make them respond to that email in writing, say, hey, contrary to what we discussed, you want to waive the appraisal, you want 0 inspection days, and you don't care if you get a spuds. Please acknowledge and confirm, and we will make that happen if you agree. And that's the best we can do. I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, like I started this, the clients are the ones who win and lose with this. But unfortunately, if we don't paper our file, we're going to get lumped in there with the losers because we have what's called we have a license. We're held to a higher standard. We should know better, right? As professionals, we should know better. And if you're going to do that, like John said, you think like I don't know where this started in 2012 through 2016. I was flipping homes, and for the longest time, every single one I saw wave spuds, wave insurance history. And I never understood why that was, and like, did they see that at some seminar somewhere that thought that was a good idea? I never understood why, because I want them to know everything about the house before they buy it, because the only thing they can do is get mad, right? If they find out something that I knew, didn't say it, didn't write it down, didn't get them to initial, all they can do is come after me after the fact. I mean, I didn't see how that was a very smart business proposition as a flipper when I was doing flipping. Like, I made sure to over disclose, like just absolute vomit of the mouth on disclosures, and even additional pages, that I signed saying, here's everything I know about the house, or thought I could know, or even heard a rumor about this house. Like, here you go, sign off. Let me know you're good. Because it doesn't help the client. Like, it may sound like the sellers get like, I don't want to fill out the spuds. Well, great, but okay, well, what do you want to fill out? Because like John said, the spuds is just a document. Like they say, if you say waive spuds, okay, cool. What document are you using for disclosure then? Because it's just a document in the contract. It doesn't waive your obligation to do it. So it's just one of those interesting things I always find funny in the contract. And we as brokers, what do we require? We require the spuds with seller disclosure signed by the buyer, right? And why do we require that? Because that's not a statutory requirement. Like, I can send you the spuds and you could tell me to kick rocks and I could never get it back. Right? You don't have to sign it, but I have to show that I delivered it. And
Andrew, I have literally had the buyer waive seller property disclosure statements and then cured them the very next day under Section 5B, because in 5B is where they promise that they have disclosed anything material. Section 4A simply says they filled out a form. So even if they waive spuds, they are still contractually obligated. I had someone call me, pardon my language, a smart ass for doing that. I go, no, I'm not a smart ass. I'm a smarter ass, because you're the dumbass that wanted your seller to have spuds waived, which is intended to protect the seller. That's the insanity of it. And as a flipper, I did flips too. Flippers that say we've never occupied the property. Andrew and I, anyone else in this room that did a flip, we knew more about that property than anyone that ever set foot in it, because for us, it was about profit and loss, and everything about that property could potentially cost us money. So a flipper saying that they don't know enough to do a spuds is one of the most ludicrous things we're ever going to hear. And we have to argue sometimes against them. Judy Lowe, our commissioner, states it very well. The commission's job is to protect the public from us. We all know that. Our job is tougher. It's often to protect the public, our clients, from themselves. And that is one of the biggest challenges you're ever going to face in this business, because the right to be stupid is like before the first right in the Bill of Rights. It is the most exercised right in humanity. They have the right to be stupid. We have the obligation to make sure they understand that their foolishness can come back to haunt them and bite them in the tush. And that's a tough part of our job. But sometimes, and in this market often, and Andrew and Todd will nod on this, we have to be the adult in the room, because they're acting on emotion, and we have to be the rational. We got to be mom. We got to be dad. Usually mom, because moms are the ones that get kids to do what they don't want to, because it's in their best interest. I use that example in class a lot. And remember, sometimes it's not fun, but sometimes you literally have to fight against your client on behalf of your client, because they want to do something that's not in their best interest. And make sure, like Todd said, put it in writing. Say, you want to be a damn fool, that's your business, but I told you not to. You might not want to use those words. Be a little more tactful about it. But the point is so important, because for us, it's about Andrew, broker, MHG company, and us as individuals covering our assets, covering your assets, because the long-term consequences are always punitively, financially punitive. And you never want to get down that road. Fortunately, most people in this room won't get sued, but the lawsuits in 2023 and 24 are going to have these themes all over them. And we need to be thinking about problem avoidance, not problem solving. We need to practice potentially paranoid, preemptive, proactive, prepared, problem prevention. And that's through perfect process, perfect practice, and perfect paperwork. I'm an old man. There's a lot of P's in my life. I'm going to shut up now.
That was a lot of P's. That was a whole string of P's. Yeah, I think, the cover page to the Spuds kind of says it all. The seller must, disclose material facts. That's all sellers. There's no exception to bank owned or flipper or anybody else. And, I always use an example in my classes about if you go to Best Buy and you spend an hour looking at the new TVs, you're trying to buy one before Super Bowl weekend or the NBA finals, and go Suns. Anyway, you spend an hour, you finally zoom in on one that you like, no pun intended, and they go to the back room and they're gone for half an hour and they come back and they got that look on their face and they're kind of staring at the floor. They're about to tell you they don't have that one in the box. And then some manager comes running from the back. Wait a minute, we'll sell you this one, and off the wall, and it's got somebody else's juice on it, and it's missing the remote and the cord, and there's no manual, and there's no box. And right away, you're thinking what? Discount, right? And all of a sudden, what if they were to say to you, "Oh, we'll just bump the price up $100. We'll carry it out to the car." No big deal, right? It's missing half the stuff, but we're going to raise the price on it because you want that one. No way. You're all thinking it's coming with less, so I want to pay less, right? And the only way they're going to get retail prices, they offer me a 5-year warranty. They offer to come to my house and install. They throw in the bracket. And it speaks to what Andrew was just talking about. He flips homes, or he used to. He was offering all the disclosure. He was telling you everything he knew. He was trying to roll out the red carpet because he knew if he wanted retail money for that spec, because like John said, it was profit and loss. He needed to offer you something, and not something with a hole in it, not something missing from it.
No, I agree. I 100% agree. It's just, it's one of those things where it doesn't make sense. If you really think about it, it doesn't make sense. It is 100% intended to protect the seller. It literally says the Spuds was created to assist sellers in disclosure. It's to assist you, to help you, to give peace of mind that we're talking about. Because the peace of mind goes both ways. Like if you as a seller want certainty in closing your transaction, well, it would raise my eyebrow if you told me I can't have a Spuds, if I can't have an insurance history, or if I get a Spuds with every box check no, and nothing about the property and you have nothing further to say about it, but hey, you've lived there for 20 years. Like that raises a flag in my opinion. So if you want maximum certainty on both sides of that transaction, the best way to get it is to do what you're supposed to do. Get the disclosures, get all the information to the buyer, let them make the informed decision, let them feel like they're not getting the wool pulled over their eyes. And that's kind of where we're at in this market, where you're paying so much for these properties. You're paying so much in comparison to what you were paying 2 years ago, 3 years ago. They're paying everything's top dollar. There's not anything that's not getting top dollar. So it's reasonable to expect from a buyer's perspective that you're getting all the information. Why would you get less when you're paying the most for the property? That's where I don't get it. Like, you should waive everything. You should have nothing available to you, but you're paying the most money.
Doesn't fit.
In my head, it doesn't work. And that's what I tell my clients. Like, listen, these are the things we're going to do. These are the things we said we would do. I even had a conversation with my client this morning. He didn't want to leave the washer and dryer. And I said, listen, it says in the addendum you signed, it says that we're getting rid of all personal property and they don't want it. I'm like, you signed it and you said it. So let's figure out how we're going to get it out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I get that you want to leave it, but that's not an option. We said we would do it. So we're doing it. And I said, more specifically, you said you would do it. Like, you were super happy when they gave you that $25,000 over asking, but they're also expecting you to uphold your end of the bargain. If they showed up to the closing table with $2,000 less, that wouldn't be acceptable. So why would it be acceptable for you to not abide by everything that you wrote in the contract?
Hey, Andrew, there's a couple of other topics people mentioned. Do you mind if we jump into one of those?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
So first of all, since time is of the essence and we're down, just like in the contract, and we're down to the last 15, a couple specific questions in there can be addressed to the broker department by sending an email to brokers at myhomegroup.com. I typed it in the chat earlier. I'll type it again as we wrap up today. Somebody was asking about how do I get my branding approved? How do we get advertising approved? You email a sample directly to the broker department, and we can give you an approval, or we can give you some feedback or some suggestions or whatever it is. Also, I would say on your My Agent portal, Broker Sumo, get into that daily if you can. You're in SkySlope and you're checking your files routinely, which you should be doing. We're adding a few alerts to SkySlope that will remind you periodically what you need. But you can always call and we can always do a quick review. But in My Agent portal, go to the broker tile, go to Broker Corner. There's a handful of videos. I mean, we've put out 50 plus videos over the last 2 or 3 months that are little 1, 2, 3 minute videos. I don't think there's anything in there over 3 minutes long that speak to some of the other topics you guys mentioned, like how do I get offer tips? That was one of them. Seller, a pre or post possession, that was one of them. Some of these other things, best practices in general, some of these things Andrew mentioned or John mentioned, following up with an email when your client wants to do something you think sounds crazy, all of the above. So, keep an eye on those videos, share them with your colleagues. But they're out there and they're, because they're kind of private to us, they're not on, available on YouTube for anyone and their dog. They're for you to go to and get them, similar like to going to the bank. The bank doesn't email you saying, please confirm your password. You go to the bank to make a deposit or whatever it is. And similar to this. Otherwise, the one topic I think we could cover quick is, post-possession, seller lease back. We don't want to call it a lease back in general. It's post-possession. And that's because there's two different, critical dates on that. When it's 30 days or less, we're okay with a post-possession agreement, keeping the seller and the buyer, and not making them landlords and tenants per se. 1E of the contract has to be modified from immediate possession to post. It's COE plus X. 5, 10, 15 days, whatever it is, and that will trigger the post-possession agreement. Sometimes the other broker has one, sometimes, we definitely have one. We don't post that document out there because we want you, wow, I don't know what just happened there. We want you to be able to email the broker department and ask for the form. It's a fillable form, because we also want to send you the pre and possession and post possession risks article from AAR, so you can share that with your client and they know what they're up against. Let me speak to it real quick.
Yeah, sure. Why we're sending and why we're asked, because there's a why to this. It's not because we want to be a pain in the butt for everybody and not give you the seller lease back and not just have it as a downloadable form. It's because commissioner's rules state that we have to disclose to our clients the potential risks of pre and post possession in writing. We have to do that. It's part of commissioner standards. So there is that. That's the reason why we're asking you to email us, because we'll send you that, and we're happy. We understand. We're all in this game with you guys. We're all doing these deals all the time. Like, we understand what the temperature of the market is. We're not doing it to be a hassle for you. We're doing it to protect you, so that if that question ever came up, I didn't know that, the tax liability was X. I didn't know that the buyer was going to do XYZ to my house. Well, here's the form that I sent you. You still agree to it after the fact. And here you go. Right. I mean, that's our obligation as licensees. We have to inform them of the potential risks. They have to consult any counsel, CPA, insurance, lawyer, if they want to. And, it's not as simple as, well, I want to stay for 14 days after. Well, great, but it's not that simple for us. It's not that simple for them. There is different layers of liability. And so that's the reason why we changed that policy, because we saw how prevalent it was becoming in this marketplace. And we wanted to make sure that our agents are abiding by the rules and living up to their end of the bargain.
Right. So
very simply put, you have someone living in someone else's house. On sellers, this is where it gets squirrely, because they've lived there for 5 years. They forget it's not my house anymore. And they really need to understand that at that point, they are living in someone else's house, and their risk and obligations increase accordingly, right down to something that we deal with on the regular, them not wanting to leave when they're supposed to. We need to make sure they need to respect the agreement they made and the gift they were given. It's a necessary evil. It's a gift. it's something above and beyond buying a house. They're letting you live in their house, but never let a seller forget on post possession. It ain't their house no more, to put it in my best Southern.
Yeah.
It's the buyers, and they seem to think, well, it's my house. It's my house until I move out, and that causes more, let's just say, phone calls for the three gentlemen talking here than you can possibly imagine. Post possession seems to be 2 weeks or until I'm ready to move out. They really need to understand those are hard dates and it's a gift, and they need to respect it. It was a negotiating point, but it really is someone living in someone else's house, which makes it a necessary evil. It is necessary, but never underthink the fact that it can go wrong and be evil. And on a post possession, getting a seller out is substantially more difficult than on a lease getting a tenant out.
Yeah.
Because the landlord tenant act is very clear, and that's not our problem. They're landlord tenant attorneys for us. Post possession, you have this gray area where it's somewhere between a hotel, Airbnb, and a lease, and that can get squirrely. So as agents, a lot of agents just think it's just something you do. There is substantial liability and potential for confusion, false assumptions, and bad expectations. And those are the things we manage, the intangibles. So always look at the big picture and make sure your clients understand. Simply put, you're living in someone else's house now, whether you move in early, pre-possession, or post-possession, and respect that part of the relationship that's been added, because it's anomalous and outside of a typical transaction. And that misunderstanding keeps us up at night.
We talk about the buyer should always be, assuming they're a guest when they're viewing a property, when they're in their inspection period. I always say that, the seller's the owner, and the buyer's a guest. And if you understand that, it helps make the whole offer process, showing process, escrow process better. But what John just said is then when we close, now the seller needs to understand, now I'm a guest in somebody else's home, and I need to treat it that way, leave it better than I found it, all the above, and not that entitled to do whatever I want to do thing. It's a very hard transition for most people to make. And we haven't even talked about pre. I don't even want to talk about pre. I'd rather 10 post to 1 pre. I'll let Andrew speak to that. But one other thing. So when it's more than 30 days, and I typed some of this in the chat, then we have to follow the RLTA guidelines. Then we want to move into a residential lease. Now we're making the parties a tenant landlord. And there's some pluses to that, and there's some minuses to that. But again, for us, it's not a decision other than just the dates. If it's 30 or less versus more than 30. And last but not least, I'm a former mortgage lender. So keep in mind that most lenders require the borrower to sign an occupancy cert at close of escrow saying they will occupy the home in 60 days or less. And so, we get people wanting post possession, and I know 72 hours sold, whatever it is, you can stay in the house for 6 months. Well, they just eliminated 90% of the buying public who's doing a conventional loan on an owner occupied primary or secondary basis.
No, that's exactly, and that's a great point. And that's the first thing that I always ask is make sure you talk to your lender. Because some of them say 60, some say 30, some, it's whatever that underwriters, wherever they're getting the money from, they have their own rules, and you need to make sure that you're not, you're right off the bat, not committing mortgage fraud. Because, what happens if they find out and they don't like it? Well, there's something called an acceleration clause that, hey, that note's due today. It's due.
And on down payment assistance loans, that number is 0 days.
Exactly.
They're certifying that they are taking occupancy as of COE because they're receiving, often from a charity or government or NGO or government organization, money. If it's a down payment assistance, you cannot do a lease back. And if the lender finds out about it and they're scrupulous, they will stop the loan. Yeah. Unfortunately, I had this conversation about 3 months ago. They just simply didn't know that. Mm-hmm. The lender didn't know that. But when it came to the DPA people who were cutting the system check, they put the kibosh on the whole thing. It fixed itself. But that's just one of those little nuances that nobody knows. Be very careful, because every time we give you a rule, then John always comes up with a damn exception.
Well, like I said, most lenders require you to occupy in 60 days or less, and certainly there's exceptions like that. That's a good point. So anyway, I think most of the other topics on the list were addressed.
There's one specific, Todd, that Sherry asked about. It's a funny way to describe Section 6J, the buyer disapproval section. items as allowed herein, which is a fancy way of saying what's allowed per the contract, right? What can you cancel on base of the contract? And whenever I get this like question on the broker hotline, they ask me, we want to cancel. We haven't done our home inspection yet. What can we cancel? A, of course you can. And B, what should we put on that list? Well, if you look at the buyer, the BINSR, the buyer's part, page 1, the first top half of that form is basically a laundry list of inspections, people you could have talked to, things that you could have looked at about the property. And I always just say, pick something on that list and it's irrefutable. Like the seller cannot argue with that, because it's literally saying, I've looked at all these things and I'm okay with it, or I've looked at all these things and I'm not okay with it. So I really feel it's the best way and the easiest way for us as agents to act is just keep it as simple as possible. What does the form say you can cancel based on? Well, it says you can cancel these. And pick one of those and you'll be fine. I don't like the neighborhood. I don't like the HOA. I don't like the way this situates in the sun. It says condition of the property. It's whatever you find is important to you. That's something that cannot be measured by a seller. Like, it's important to me as the buyer. And I looked at it.
Be careful.
And I'm disapproving it.
But be careful. Make sure it cannot be interpreted as violating Title 8 of the Civil Rights Act of 1968.
Right, for sure.
Don't ever go anywhere near race, color, religion, national origin, familial status, handicap, gender, sexual orientation, or gender identity. The important thing is it's material to the buyer. It doesn't have to be logical or commonsensical to the seller, because remember, material is often not a fact. It's an opinion during the inspection period. When you get into court, it has to be a fact. But not liking the neighborhood because they found a house 2 doors down that had car up on stilts, that's a legitimate reason to cancel. For some people, that's ludicrous when you saw the house that had the 2 cars, but that's a legitimate reason to cancel. So it's material to the buyer, not acceptable to the seller. And that's really important to educate our sellers. When you put a house on the market, say, you understand, until you have that inspection period behind, the buyer can basically use the rectal retrieval method of coming up with a reason to cancel, and they're going to get out of this deal. That was a polite way of saying, and that's really an education thing for sellers, because sellers should know that they really don't get to question. Andrew may remember, we actually had sellers call and say they were going to sue us because a buyer made false accusations about their house. That was in a written email. We laughed so hard because we were all picturing the house standing before a judge saying, Your Honor, I didn't do it. It was a false accusation. Sellers need to understand there's a back door there that the buyer can open for just about any reason, as long as it doesn't break the law, or violate fair housing. Other than that, if they want to make it up, they can. I mean, let's face it, feng shui to most of us is silly. It's absolutely a legitimate reason to cancel. Although where I come from, it's pronounced feng shui.
Let's see, we got about 3 minutes left. Is there anything that anybody has a question on, wants us to cover, something we didn't cover, something that we talked about that brought up a question before we wrap this up? Anything?
Can I point out something real quick, Andrew? Because this has been such an issue on documents for the last 3 weeks. It's just gone nuts. Remember, if you sell a My Home Group listing, if you're in the Queen Creek office and you're selling a listing for Wickenburg, clearly you probably never met the person. That is still consent to limited dual required, and you must check both on lines 450 and 464 of the contract. I feel like I'm being a pain because I reject 4, 5, 6 of those every day, and you have to go back and fix it or do an addendum. But the agency has 3 stages: disclosure, election, and confirmation. That is stage 3, and it must be done correctly. The consent to limited dual obviously needs to be done before, but that is one of the number 1 reasons we're rejecting. So if you sell a My Home Group listing, just save yourself the pain of us rejecting it, and make sure that you check 450 and 464. And if you get one from another agent and it's got 450, check the buyer, but it's a My Home Group agent, make sure you fix that in the counter so you're not getting rejections. And how embarrassing to go back to seller over something that looks as trivial to them as a little checkbox. For us, it's a massive legal protection issue because dual agency increases liability.
100%. That's a good point. And it's like you said, small checkbox, and it could feel like we're being nitpicky on your files, but in reality, you know, you don't want that one file that we weren't nitpicky on to be the one that gets, you know, litigation and they're looking at it. Well, you didn't check every box correctly. You didn't cross every T correctly. You didn't dot every I correctly. That's not it's all it ever takes is one, guys, just one file to not have been done properly. And it could, you know, whether or not you win, lose, or draw, you're still going to have that anxiety and time that cannot be recovered, right? I mean, that's, to me, that's the biggest thing. I know that I'm doing things right and I can defend myself, but I don't want to have to take the time to defend myself. That's the thing that I think agents lose. Yeah, could you win? Could you lose? Yeah, sure, but that time never goes back. So something to think about as far as risk management, and us as a broker department, trust us, we don't want to be rejecting files. That's not something we want to. I would much rather click accept and hit green and not write you a note and not have to come back to that file ever again. Those are the things that you know, it's a misconception. We don't get paid per click. We don't get paid, you know, for the number of rejections we have. We don't get paid for the number of times you guys have to come back to us. That's actually detrimental to us as a broker department. We don't want to have to review those things. So if you could just think of it from a perfect paperwork standpoint, like John said earlier, perfect paperwork leads to less problems. That's kind of where we're at. I mean, again, we're not, as a broker crew, when we're reviewing files, it goes so much faster for us if we just click accept instead of having to type a note for you. So
you guys are our clients.
Yep.
Remember, you guys are our clients, and part of your job is to protect their client from themselves. Part of our job is to protect you from yourselves, because you may do something that could go badly for you. Our job is to make sure it never does. And in the long run, if you ever get in a jackpot, you'll look back and go, okay, now I understand why they were seemed like they were going overboard to protect me from myself. Same with your clients. That's our job, because we want you to have a happy, successful, hassle-free career without ever paying a penny in legal fees or an E&O deductible. That is very important to us, because what it puts you through can often mess with your career, and it's not exactly fun for that gentleman right there, Andrew Glenn, either.
All right, guys, did anybody have anything else?
I rest my case.
We good? All right, well, cheers to Q3 starting, and hopefully you guys are out there selling a ton of houses. Let us know if you need anything. Always call the broker hotline or email the broker department. Thanks, guys.
Selling.
Thanks guys so much.